Fit Degree is more than just two guys with microphones. It is the studio management software you've been looking for. For more info, reach out to me on our website at www.fitdegree.com, on Instagram at the handle FitDegree, or my email dan.berger, that's BERGER, at fitdegree.com to get the conversation started. All right, now on to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fit Degree podcast. I'm Dan, your host for the show, and co-hosting with me is Nick. Today, we have an exciting guest with a very traditional lineage. Jenna McDonald, the owner of Devoted Yogi, dedicated 4 years of her life solely to the study of ashram yoga. True to the contemplative nature of her practice, Jenna has found that her students respond much greater when introduced to the deep cognitive teachings behind the physical movements. Today, Jenna is going to discuss with us how she operates her studio a little bit differently for the benefit of her students. Thanks for joining us, Jenna. So happy to have you on the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about, you've got a very interesting background. As you just discussed with me on the phone before, ashram is not as common of a practice anymore. Take us all the way back to when you spent those 4 years studying this, how you got into it, and sort of fast forward us to how that got you here today.
Absolutely. I think, as most stories go, you have to kind of find your way back to the origin point. And my more traditional education, BA, is in Native Systems of Education
Okay.
and decolonization, which you don't make much money studying decolonization, let me tell you. Basically, it's the study of how we unbuild our thinking and our mind. And that ended up leading me to a yoga teacher. And so I just want to honor the fact that it's really indigenous art forms that brought me to the ashram to begin with. And that I think I had to be in already a mind frame to be taught. And I want to just honor that I kind of stand on the shoulders of giants when I do this work.
Sure. Is this kind of when the student is ready, the teacher will appear?
It is, and it's a little bit cliche, but there's no other way. We're kind of have to do the work. And so it was synchronistic. I was in Indonesia, Bali, Indonesia. At the time, I had a severe back injury. I had a dual compression fracture
Whoa.
in my spine, and that happened right before I was about to take my trip. It was one of those things, and I was like, I'm going anyways, and I'm not getting surgery, and I'm just gonna do this renegade style. And so I went to Asia, went to Bali on a meditation retreat, and I ended up staying. I didn't come home, and I met a teacher there, Swami Vagishananda, of a particular lineage. And at the time, I didn't know anything about Vedanta or the teaching of the Vedas. And I studied with him, and it changed my life, right? And I was able to see his eyes and his vision. And he's the one who referred me and said, well, I think you would do well to continue. So go see my teacher in the middle of hell nowhere, Pennsylvania. Taylorsburg. There's a lumber mill and a flea market and an ashram.
Wait, so I have a quick question. You went all the way to Bali, Indonesia, found this Swami, trained with him, and he said, you're going to go to my teacher now, which brought you back to Pennsylvania.
Correct.
That almost seems to be the opposite of how you would expect this to go.
Yeah. So I ended up in what felt like really a micro India, because the ashram was built, of course, for devotees. And it was specifically built in that location because of its proximity to New Jersey and New York and the East Indian populations that followed and understood and knew the lineage. So I was basically transported there via chains of events and ended up being, one of the only, in fact, probably the only woman at that time in their 6-week courses. And you would stay for about 4 months and study the Vedas every day. It was about 8 hours of classes, listening, studying Sanskrit, studying chanting, studying puja, which is like a form of prayer, and thanksgiving, and very little yoga asana, but some stretching. And that was my entrance. That's how I got there.
So that's I guess even calling it an intensive course doesn't do it justice because an intensive is, a crash course. They're trying to do it quickly. It seemed here that this was the only real way to learn what it is that you were learning was to completely dive into it
It was a
and become
lifestyle.
yeah, you had to live it.
Yeah, you had to live it, and you didn't go anywhere. It's a little bit like yeah, you're kind of in solitary in that way because you're so far away from everything else and very quiet. It's a contemplative lifestyle. It's a little bit like I imagine it would be going to a monastery or
Right.
this sort of thing.
That sounds like a really cool experience. I'll never forget. I always struggled learning a second language, I'm talking like middle school, high school. No matter what, I always got past like the 1 and 2 course and never was able to like grasp and move on. And I consider myself fairly intelligent across the board, but like second language never got it. And it was my Spanish teacher of my junior year that said I didn't know Spanish. I couldn't perform Spanish well until I lived in Spain for 6 months to a year. And I was like, well, this just isn't fair then because I'm never going to move to Spain. But what I got from that is like to change your life, to really grasp a second language, to do something like you did. You couldn't go home to Netflix
Correct.
after a work day. You had to live that day in and day out, hour in, hour out, and really put yourself in that position if you wanted to understand it to its deepest levels.
Yes.
And it also sounds like what you were doing was far more than the physical practice and the spiritual immersion. It also sounded there was a bit of academic study in there as well.
Yeah.
Now, to what level do you found that the academic study helped you with the rest of the practice or the way it integrated? We say mind, body, spirit connection. I'm sure that, was probably a big part of the mind connection. How did that integrate and really improve the rest of the practice?
That's a great question. um, I think it was instrumental. I don't think I could have retained the knowledge within the Vedas
Mm-hmm.
had I not had the language to see it.
Sure.
And I think that's so vital, and like Nick was saying, it's so amazing to learn another language when you're really immersed, not just for the new neural networks and what it does to our ability to create flow state, but also because it allows you to see life through a completely new lens that English language doesn't allow for.
I very much agree. Nick knows this. A lot of my friends knows I'm a big word for nerds, and how the Latin roots and how you can, if you don't know what a word means, you can piece it together. And there are so many. The English language is so strange, I believe, because it's so fantastic in certain ways that you can piece parts together and make certain things. But then we have so many rules that make zero sense. Where here's how the language works, except when it doesn't, except when it works this way. And there are so many other languages, German, Swiss, Chinese, Indian, that they have translations for states of being and states of thought and feeling and things that have nowhere near a translation to English. I know in martial arts, my teacher, he couldn't translate something for me because there's a transition state. And he said they described it to him when he did something similar. He went over to China and lived in one of the Shaolin temples. And the only English translation they had for this transitioning state of being is the. It is the. And there's no better translation. And it was so difficult to learn this concept when it was called the.
And it's so funny, because in Sanskrit, there's similar small statements,
Mm-hmm.
like I am that, or this is that.
Right.
And, for us, it just sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo. It sounds like the.
Yeah.
It has no meaning, and yet it's vital to understand.
And would you be
Yeah.
able to explain that concept to somebody that didn't already have, to some level, a wealth of experience in the field of learning what you did, or would they need so much prerequisite knowledge for that to even make sense that you can't explain it to somebody else?
So I feel like the entire journey of my work is how do I articulate that to someone without my background?
Okay.
So that's what I'm aiming to do with my new studio model, basically, is how do I teach yoga in a way that students arrive at these understandings through a series of embodiment practices. And I'm just going to jump into some different language around this. We come from a mechanistic society that breaks things down and compartmentalizes.
Mm-hmm.
And yoga is not, it's pre-mechanistic society. So it's about unity. It's about I am that, we are one, right? Unity consciousness. But first we have to take it as relational. So instead of being mechanistic and separate, first we have to understand that everything in the body is in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in relationship to absolutely everything around us. So even in a yoga class, this idea that we're on our own mat and we're not all influencing each other is completely void and doesn't work. Like that falls short.
Sure.
We're starting to integrate these concepts better by using it through the body or performing it through the body and understanding it in our own life. And then we can start to apply the philosophy in a way that we get it.
Well, that makes fantastic sense because if you think about it, when we're born, a little infant baby, if you think about, we don't have memories until we're 3, 4 years old. We don't know how to use our mind to a certain extent, but we're already using our body instinctively. That's that's the first thing we begin using. So to me, it only makes sense that we would have to do these physical practices, learn how to use the body first, and then, the mental and spiritual ones may be a little more difficult, but because we do the physical movements, that becomes the prerequisite to learning these things.
And even this, understanding of proprioception, the ability to feel something at the same time that we cognize it is an incredible form of yoga or unity, but it's a relative form, right? But we need to build those basic foundational, pieces of our yoga or of a house, whatever you build, you need a foundation. So we do need that to understand. Yeah.
Awesome. So just to make sure I'm clear there, that was an awesome word used. Does that mean essentially, in layman's terms, taking our feelings and our thoughts and finding the synergy between them?
It's different.
Okay.
Proprioception, and Google it later. It means the ability to feel a movement as we're taking the movement. So, for instance, when I'm with my kids, I can lift weights and hang out with them and talk and get my workout in while they're there. But
Sure.
I can't do that with yoga because it takes all of my energy and my focus to feel what I'm doing as I do it.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's more about integration of the ability to feel the movement as we take it. It's like when someone loses the responsiveness in a limb and they have to regain that responsiveness, they have to regain their proprioception, their
I
ability.
see. And is that something that is proprioception generally gained through a lot of meditative exercises?
I would say it's gained through properly cued and informed yoga, like physical yoga.
Awesome. So you went to India, you came back to Pennsylvania, you studied with your teacher's teacher, you learned these amazing things and words such as proprioception, and then what?
Yeah, he did. I mean, in that lineage, I didn't get that language. That came later when
Okay.
I was trying to figure out, how do I bring these Sanskrit teachings to a modern Western population. Then what happened? Well, then my whole life changed. I had a child, and so everything just
That's
went
life
on
changing.
stop mode, and I had to rubber met the road. I had to put it all into personal practice. And being a mother has been the most challenging initiation of my life, but the most phenomenal growth. So post, Audie or child, first child, then I really started to see how if I was going to be a mother and keep up a physical practice, I was going to need to really make my physical yoga a deep part of my life
Mm-hmm.
and my business. So I really created my physical yoga asana business because of a personal need and a desire to translate these teachings. So then I created what was at that time Passion for Practice, personal coaching and yoga work. I taught all over the place, like a lot of teachers do. I recently read an article by Dylan Warner who said, exactly my story. I was teaching 25 classes a week, driving all over everywhere, busting my butt. And then I had to restructure. It was fun. It was great. I learned a lot about bodies and modern yogis. And then it's been a process of refinement. So then opening my own studio and then realizing that wasn't quite what I wanted, which is really, I feel like, the most interesting turn in the road that we're at now.
Now, let me ask, in what way do you mean that wasn't quite what you wanted? Because I know we're going to get to how your studio changed, and that may sort of play into it. But
Yeah.
was it the actual having a building and running a studio, or was it the way the studio was run?
Inherently, it was the way the studio and studios are run.
Okay.
What I saw happening was, and I've thought about this a lot, so I'm going to just say what I've come to conclude. We've built kind of a codependency in our modern forms of yoga, where students come and they don't think a lot about what they're up to, and they expect their yoga teacher to kind of deliver, like a performance. They expect their teacher to uplift them. They want it to feel good, and those are all fine things, but it doesn't place any responsibility on the student. And so you come into this little bit of a codependent relationship where one person is hanging on the other, and the person that's kind of being hung on as the teacher isn't really allowing themselves to grow in that either. So it's been a really interesting thing to just look at that and say, well, what can I do to remind students of yoga that we need to go through a period of studentship where we start placing faith in the practice again, like wholeheartedly, and we say, I'm going to study yoga, and I'm going to, educate myself. I'm going to put myself in positions where I have to think, not just be led, but to think for myself. And that's going to get me eventually to where all these yoga sutras say I can go, So that was the realization in one element. And the other was just, to be honest, I wasn't having a great time. Like, I was teaching a lot of classes still every week. I was doing tons of, mind, body, back end work that was a little bit grueling. And I had become more of like a software tech than a yoga teacher. And my people wanted more from me. And that's where what it comes down to. And they were ready. The students were ready. There you go again. The students were ready, and the teacher was there. And so we shifted our model.
So you said you shifted your model. Just for a little background, we talked about it before the podcast, but for the people listening, your first business was Passion for Fit or Fit for Passion, and that
Almost. Passion for practice.
Passion for Practice. I guess I kept thinking fit because you were saying, what these modern yogis are expecting is more fitness-based physical practice. So Passion for Practice, and this was the typical studio of people. Someone Googles closest yoga studio towards near me. They find your studio. They walk in. They pay a drop-in fee. They go.
And they want you to make them feel great.
Yeah, they expect an unbelievable experience and for you to do all the heavy lifting.
Yes.
After years of noticing that the big thing that takeaway for me was that you said you weren't having fun with it anymore. And I think that's the most important thing, no matter what you're doing, is you weren't enjoying it. You were probably dreading work. You were dreading class. I'm sure your playlist wasn't as, much of a variable as you want it to be. And all those little things were adding up. So now you made a change. You changed your business to Devoted Yogi, and you took on those students that were taking it on for themselves as much as you were taking on as the instructor.
Yes. So we moved from that mechanistic model
Right. So let me ask this. You're moving on to a semi-private or referral-based studio system now. How do you think a lot of students may have been upset to hear that this isn't on your teacher, this is on you? You can't learn without being a student. You have to want to learn. You have to do the work to learn. Information is injected into you. Do you think people balked at that a little, didn't want to hear that? They wanted it to be easier and were not happy when it was told, you have to do, if you want to learn, you have to do the heavy lifting.
There was definitely some balking going on in the beginning. And I think anytime I'm a hyper creative individual, so I change a lot. So people have always had a hard time with the amount of change in my business. But what I've come to realize is just the people that can hack it are going to stay, and those are the people I want to work with. So yes, some people didn't love it, and others have been so deeply appreciative. And the feedback really, honestly, it comes in your numbers. And if people are buying it and they're saying, this is what I want, then that's where you're at. And so basically, both what I did was I created only 2 classes a week. I teach twice. People had to sign up for the entire year. They pay $15 in. They can't drop out. They're on auto pay. I mean, I had 20 conversations with well, if I want to leave halfway, no. This is like a full,
Yeah.
This is what
um,
you offer.
this is what I offer. And that was huge for me too, as an individual to just say, this is where I'm at. I'm drawing hard line for great growth. And both of my programs are sold out. I have waiting lists on both classes.
Wow,
Wow.
that's
That's a lot to
amazing.
say. Yeah.
So you're in Seattle, right?
I'm
Or you're near Seattle. You're in Washington.
I'm on a tiny island, 8 miles west of Seattle. It's a 30-minute ferry ride. It's a magical space.
Okay. But
Yeah.
that area is a pretty yoga rich area, if I'm not mistaken, correct? There's lots of studios.
There are lots of studios. Yeah.
So it must be almost a breath of fresh air for you to have these are my students. They are set with me for the year. And just due to the nature of not only what you're teaching, but the model of your business, I'm sure you must have an incredibly high retention rate and customer loyalty as well.
And that was part of my reason in the first place was I was looking at this going, yoga businesses are based not on loyalty to their actual clients, but on always looking for new clients. And why would I do that? If
Yeah.
somebody me for 2.5, 3 years, they're the people I want to serve.
Right.
So it
And you
is about,
just said something too that I always enjoyed was going deeper into your customers instead of going wider to get more customers. And people just think more members, more members, more members. I want to hit 200 members, 300 active members instead of going deeper into them. And this is one of our first podcasts talked about it is saying, okay, now it's a little bit different for your model, but from a drop in to a class pass to a membership to a retreat to a yoga teacher training to all of a sudden now it's like, this is your yogi. It's almost like a disciple of your studio. So you get to that process a lot faster by vetting them and saying, okay, you're ready to take my class. And if they're ready to take your class, I mean, that's it.
yeah, they're in for the full ride, and I
Yeah.
think that's exciting for people too. I'm going somewhere, you know. When you study flow state, you realize that in order to really shift into our highest level of capacity in the brain, we need goals. We need daily, tactile, tangible results. And we need to have relationships around
Yes.
that work. So it's a fascinating kind of reckoning for me to go, oh, this is what's been needed all along.
Yes,
Um,
I think there are very many interesting, for lack of a better word, phenomenon that occur in the brain that a mundane life will not trigger your brain in certain ways.
yeah,
Competition, achievement, goal setting, and goal achievement. These types of things are challenging, especially challenges, critical thinking. Um, I could go on forever, but these kinds of things, as you were mentioning earlier, create these neural pathways in the brain. And if we don't use these neural pathways, they begin to disappear. Conversely, if we only use certain neural pathways, very robotic, wake up, do this, do that, every day is the same, we ingrain these almost trenches in our brain. And those are the only ones it really knows the neural pathways that get used. The other ones begin to deteriorate. And,
Yeah,
how do you grow as an individual if, you live on autopilot?
correct. Well, you're not making conscious choices. You're not making true decisions. So I'm just pushing my students into making real decisions.
And I'm sure they
It's an
appreciate
exciting,
that.
simple way of putting it.
Yeah.
Like we always talk about your why, like, why do you do it? Why is it behind it? It's just forcing my students to think.
For sure. And they love it. And, who knew that, we all kind of want to be like pushed off the branch to fly, it's been working well. So I'm grateful for that.
That's exciting. I would love to do a follow-up podcast in 6 months to kind of see where your business is at and because you said things change rapidly. I think that's typical entrepreneur. Adapt or die is one of my favorite things. You're constantly making adjustments based on the new knowledge that you just found out. So it'd be interesting to see in 6 months, what adjustments you have made to better serve your students.
Yeah, I'd love that.
I mean, hopefully there's none, but at the same time, hopefully there are a few things that you're going to learn over the next couple months.
Oh, I'm sure.
Well, on that note, do you have any words for the listeners or any way they could reach out to you if they want to do a similar business model in their area or just learn something from you?
Absolutely. And in tandem with that, I want to just speak slightly to the women's work that I do because they're related.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if people want to find me online, it's of course www.devotedyogi.com. And on that site, I have a listen page where I actually offer a free guided visualization and a free guided meditation. Both are on there. They're easy. You can download them. There's no strings attached. You don't even need to enter your email. And so that's like a nice little portal in if people want to actually just get started. And on that same page, women can join the Wild Awareness audio program where they'll get audios that have gone the past audios, and then they'll get the opportunity to join live for future audios.
Very cool.
And join anytime. It's $108, which is a really low investment for 10 months of content. It was kind of a beta program. I'm sure it'll be like 7 times that next time I launch it. So there's that. And then, of course, my whole studio is kind of built around my Radiance 200-hour teacher training for women. And that's a phenomenal program that incorporates all of these lineage-based practices with very specific needs that women of this time have for coming out of competition with one another, for realizing their worth, for realizing their agency in the world. And so we do really unique programs, and people come from all over the US actually for our course. So people can travel to us. The last thing I'll speak to is I have a women's water temple retreat that's happening in this next September 2019. And that's in Leavenworth, Washington, up in the mountains in a phenomenal place that has a bunch of water therapy.
Wow, that sounds nice.
Oh, it's incredible. So if you don't know about it, check out the Post Hotel. That's where we do it. And so those are great opportunities.
Yeah, and I see the yoga teacher training is heavy in March, April, and May for anyone listening.
Correct.
So if you get a weekend off, it's just, the 3 days. So correct me, you have to attend all of those, correct?
Yeah, so women come out for the whole program.
Okay.
And or the Women's Water Temple Retreat, which is just a 3-day practice in September.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, that's super exciting. I hope you get some more yoga teachers out there for that experience. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Jenna. We'll be in talk soon.
Absolutely. It was fun. Thank you.